In part 1 I covered a brief history of the canal and the reasons why it came into being. From way back in 1272 up to the present day, a period of about 750 years. During that time the facts are very sketchy, particularly for the early days of its existence. It's not until the 1830s that we can get a more comprehensive picture of what went on. I have no doubt that records are available in the Exeter City archives, but trawling through those would be a task far bigger than I would want to do. Given that the most significant development of the canal took place when Turf Lock was created in 1827, in this part of the story I will concentrate on this area. If you go back over the many years of the estuary's history, it has always been a very dynamic area, especially during the days of sail and exploration that went on around the world. From my own personal experience, when I first went salmon fishing back in the 1970s as a netsman on the estuary, running out a seine net in the immediate area of the canal entrance, the Countess Weir motor vessel used to transport solid waste from Countess Weir sewerage works went out to sea and dump it. It was still in operation then, and 2 or 3 times a week would regularly come through Turf Locks. Consequently, I would see the lock in operation very often. One of our favourite places to shoot the seine was just below the entrance of the canal. This stretch of water was named the Range. Fishermen on the Ex have had their own names for each area and stretch of water, split up and down where they could shoot the net and land the net. These would be determined by the way the mud shifted from time to time and governed by tidal and water flow. So again, the fact that the Ex is a spate river played a big part as to where boats or ships could be moored. Importantly, the entrance to the canal was then and still is of concern, keeping it free from silting up has always been problematical, and we have to say all thanks to the Courtney family for damming up the flow with the weirs upstream. Around the entrance of the canal there's always been a couple of deep water moorings for the ships waiting to go into the canal, usually on the high tide. The area just east of the canal entrance have names such as Jan's Cove, the Cupboard, and the main channel of the river stays the same owing to the bedrock formation. But the mud that accumulates shifts around depending on the changes in the flow of the river. That is why when the weir was put in upstream, things changed so dramatically. Dredging out the accumulations of the mud has been quite an ongoing task, and in recent years somewhat neglected. In the early 1980s, restoration of the lock gates was carried out, and the Turf Hotel had a revival after many years of decline. The track alongside the canal that meets up with the road to Exminster Station and the Swan's Nest Hotel and pub was improved upon, and although remains a private road, does give vehicle access. It also provides the cycle track that has become such a popular highway. Cycling has gone from strength to strength over the past 30 years, and Exeter's planners have played a big part in that development when creating a network of cycle tracks around the city. And now, Devon, and indeed nationally, Turf Lock has become a magnet for cyclists and canoeists alike, there is now a national cycleway called Sustrans, and it's a UK sustainable transport charity. Its flagship project is the National Cycle Network, which has created over 14,000 miles of signed cycle routes. Having this as part of the canal's infrastructure has really made a big difference to its popularity. So consequently, Turf Hotel has not only thrived as a result of it, but become a focal point in the area. And of course, it's always been a popular port of call for the sailing fraternity on the estuary. On a recent visit to the hotel, as I was sat outside having a drink, a couple who I had observed moved seats, came close, and we got chatting, as one does. The fellow introduced himself as Chris. It turned out he was the son of an old railway colleague of mine, a former train guard, who had passed away a couple of years ago. Chris, who had built himself a steel yacht 20 years ago, had sailed the world and crossed the Atlantic many times. His sailing days had now come to an end, and his boat was up for sale and moored up in the canal basin. We chatted for perhaps an hour, mostly about Countess Weir, his father, and his travels overseas. He and his partner were selling up and moving to South Wales as soon as he could, for family reasons. He revered the many times he had passed through the Turf Lock to go up the canal to work on his boat in the Exeter Basin. Meeting Chris and his partner was a chance meeting completely out of the blue, but it has given me a chance to highlight the continuing importance and part that Turf Lock plays in today's world. You can see his yacht in this photo. It's the one in the middle of the group. Her name is Moontide, and Chris has a blog on the internet regaling his exploits. It's worth a look if you get the chance. Following on, as you can see here, the number of people using the grounds around Turf Lock, the picnic grounds, and people come from far and wide. Here, a few shots of the canal entrance at various stages, giving a better perspective. This brings me to the end of this episode featuring the Turf Hotel. It's a wonderful place to visit, and I never tire of its beautiful nature, with the occasional sound of the trains running nearby, but hardly any other motorised sounds. It really is good to get away from the sounds of traffic noise. And when the tide is out, the chorus from the birds feeding on the mud is just heavenly to listen to. Having my newfound mode of transport has given me a lot of fun, coming back to places like Turf Lock. In my next video on the canal, I will be featuring Topsham Lock, the Topsham Ferry and Philip.Charles Sluice.